Tonight, we are not beginning with a famous philosopher or a mighty king. Instead, we are stepping into something far more awkward, uncertain, and risky. We are entering the world of love and relationships in medieval times. It may sound surprising, but searching for love in an age filled with disease, rigid rules, and constant watchful eyes was often more stressful than sending a late-night message and waiting nervously for a reply. Romance existed, but it rarely followed the heart. From soft poetic verses whispered in secret to marriages decided by land, livestock, and family advantage. Medieval love had very little to do with emotions. It was mostly about survival, duty, and ownership, not personal choice. Before we settle in, you can support the channel by liking this video and subscribing, but only if you truly enjoy being here. I would also love to know where you are watching from and what time it is for you right now. Seeing people join from different corners of the world is always fascinating. Now, dim the lights, let a fan hum gently in the background, and allow your body to relax. Take a slow breath as we begin tonight's story together. Imagine standing in a small medieval town, or inside a cold stone fortress, wondering how people found love in those days. You might think it began with friendly talk, small compliments, or slowly getting to know someone. That thought ends quickly. Love did not work that way at all in the Middle Ages. Dating, as we understand it today, simply did not exist. There was no flirting, no private meetings, and no time to see whether feelings would grow. Most major choices were already decided for you. Parents, local lords, or religious figures chose who you would marry, when it would happen, and what would be exchanged to seal the agreement. If you were born into a noble family, your future was often decided in childhood. You could be promised to someone long before you understood what marriage meant. Many couples first met on their wedding day. These marriages were not about love or shared interests. They were about land, power, titles, and alliances between families. Life was only slightly easier for farmers and laborers. Families still controlled marriage choices, and love was rarely discussed. If your parents knew another family with good animals, useful skills, or a strong reputation, that was enough to arrange a match. Personal feelings mattered very little. People did have emotions, and romance did exist, but survival came first. Protecting property and family wealth mattered more than happiness. Falling in love before marriage was seen as risky, and loving someone outside marriage was considered shameful. Such love was allowed mainly in sad songs and poems, not in real life. Still, people dreamed quietly. Someone might write a short poem in secret, or steal a glance in the market. Feelings were hidden and rarely acted upon. Most people followed orders and avoided growing attached to the wrong person. In medieval life, love belonged to poets, while marriage belonged to parents, priests, and politics. Attraction still happened. You might notice how someone worked or carried themselves. Your heart reacted, but you had to stay careful. Romance needed proof and value. Before thinking about love, the real question was what you could offer in return. For young men, this meant land, animals, tools, or a stable home. Kind words meant nothing without resources. If your family lacked wealth or property, your chances of marriage were small. For young women, a dowry was expected. This could include money, clothes, or livestock. Without it, marriage could be delayed for years. Talent and personality mattered far less than what your family could provide. Even when two people cared deeply for each other, it often changed nothing. If their families were not equally matched, the relationship ended. Among nobles, marriage was even stricter. You were not just an individual, but part of a political deal. For common people, marriage was practical. It focused on shared labor, land, and survival. Love was a hope for later, not the starting point. Small gifts like food or handmade items were sometimes exchanged, but they carried serious meaning. In medieval life, resources spoke louder than emotions. Knights followed a strange tradition called courtly love. This was not real romance, but emotional performance. A knight devoted himself to a noble lady, often already married, and expressed love from a distance. He showed loyalty through poems, symbols, and public gestures. He wore her colors and competed in her honor. The lady remained distant and unreachable. That distance was important. Real contact was rare and dangerous, and even a small gesture could cause gossip. This system worked because everyone pretended it was harmless. It allowed emotional expression without openly breaking social rules. It was feeling without action. Instead of words, people used symbols, gloves, ribbons, sleeves, or small objects carried messages. These tokens were powerful and easily misunderstood. Giving the wrong item could lead to rumors or trouble. Even simple courtship was difficult because privacy did not exist. Parents, relatives, priests, and neighbors watched closely. Walks were supervised, and every action was judged. Love was careful, controlled, and constantly observed. In the medieval world, feelings were real, but society made sure they stayed silent. The main goal of medieval courtship was to protect purity, defend family honor, and completely prevent any unsupervised contact. Touching was strongly discouraged, especially before marriage, especially in private, and ideally not at all. This is why chaperones existed. Their role was to observe every interaction closely. Walks were supervised, conversations happened in groups, and even sitting near someone was controlled. You could share a bench only if an older relative was nearby, pretending not to listen while hearing everything. The church reinforced these rules with absolute seriousness. Courtship was tightly controlled, like a guard managing a narrow gate. Priests warned people during sermons and wrote long explanations about why flirting was dangerous. Religious writers actually produced guides describing the risks of romance. Somewhere, monks copied these warnings by candlelight, carefully preserving lessons about human weakness. Even letters were rarely private. Some religious institutions opened personal messages to check their moral content. Love notes could be read, judged, and stopped before reaching their destination. Falling in love required silence, caution, and constant awareness that family, community, and God were always watching. If you were in love, or something close to it, the feeling was often a mix of longing, confusion, and quiet waiting. Maybe you exchanged a glance during a feast. Maybe someone picked up something you dropped and did not rush to give it back. These tiny moments felt powerful, even though you could not speak freely. Mothers, priests, and relatives stayed close, observing every movement. Because speaking was risky, people turned to writing. Secret letters became both the safest and most dangerous choice. You could not openly say how you felt. Feelings were hidden inside. Symbolic, dramatic language filled with emotion and metaphor. Writing required education, which many people lacked. When letters were written, they used rough parchment and sometimes included pressed flowers or scent. Mistakes were common. Letters were lost, misdelivered, or misunderstood. Sending the letter was another challenge. You needed someone trustworthy to carry it. A servant, monk, sibling, or traveling singer might help. Sometimes poems were sung publicly while pretending they meant nothing personal. This was dangerous. If the words sounded too passionate, accusations of immoral thoughts could follow. Despite the risk, people kept writing. Some letters survived. Some poems were shared quietly. In a world full of rules and supervision, written words felt powerful. Writing allowed emotions to exist, as long as names were hidden and meanings stayed unclear. Occasionally, life allowed brief freedom. Feasts, festivals, and celebrations gave people a small break from constant control. During these moments, flirting was allowed in a limited and public way, as long as everyone saw it and chose to ignore it. Music played, drinks flowed, and smiles came more easily. Farmers tried to impress others through games, races, or simple performances. Dancing offered the closest thing to physical contact. A brief touch or turn could communicate more than words. Some dances were designed specifically to allow polite flirting while pretending nothing serious was happening. Nobles flirted with more formality. Poetry, compliments, and small gifts were common. Food was often shared. If a gift was accepted warmly, it showed interest. If it was ignored or passed to someone else, the message was clear. Even then, someone was always watching. One mistake could become gossip repeated for weeks. For a short while, people could imagine a world where love was not a transaction and joy was not suspicious. That feeling never lasted long. For ordinary villagers, romance was practical. Life was difficult, and survival mattered more than emotion. A good partner was reliable, hardworking, and steady. Attraction grew through shared effort, not poetry. Gifts were useful items like food, firewood, or handmade tools. Conversations happened during work, while walking to the mill or caring for animals. People did not speak in verse. They talked about crops, weather, and village news. Still, there was warmth in this simplicity. Life together was built on cooperation. If both families agreed, marriage happened quickly. One person brought household items. The other brought animals. Together, they began the daily task of survival. It was not romantic in the modern sense, but it was honest. Once this stage was reached, marriage stopped being a dream. It became a contract. A serious agreement discussed carefully, often with far more attention than emotion. You gather a few witnesses, speak with the village priest, and try not to stumble over the unfamiliar words of the ceremony. Beneath the soft prayers and blessings, a serious checklist is being followed. Who provides the dowry? Who owns the land? Who keeps the animals? What happens if one of you dies during a bad season? This is medieval romance at its most honest and practical. If you belong to the upper class, the process becomes even heavier. Marriage turns into a full legal affair. Parents from both families are involved, along with priests, scribes, and sometimes a relative who once studied law and insists on giving advice. The bride and groom mostly stand quietly, nod politely, and look important. You may barely know the person beside you. Your families have already decided the match makes sense. One estate needs land. The other needs money. The family names fit well together. Love is pleasant, but the agreement matters more. Once the marriage is complete, it is meant to last a lifetime. Divorce is almost impossible unless something extreme can be proven, such as a hidden family connection or a serious religious error. Annulments do exist, but they require influence, paperwork, and usually money. Not every marriage is unhappy. Some couples slowly grow fond of each other. Working together, raising children, and surviving difficult years often create real affection. In medieval life, patience and cooperation are sometimes what love looks like. The church watches all of this closely. Marriage is considered sacred. You're not just making a contract, but a promise before God. You stand, exchange vows, smile carefully, and accept a simple blessing, sometimes as ordinary as a basket of food. Now imagine growing tired of contracts and negotiations, tired of being treated like property. You are noble, but you want to marry for love, not land or family strategy. That choice alone is enough to create a scandal. When nobles ran away to marry, it caused chaos. This was not just personal rebellion, but political damage. Alliances were broken, power was lost, and families were embarrassed. Imagine a noble woman promised to a powerful household who falls in love with a poor young soldier. They meet in secret, whisper promises, and disappear one night to marry quietly with only a few witnesses. At home, anger follows. Parents rates. The church is alarmed. Gossip spreads quickly. For the groom, the risk is serious. At best, he keeps his wife and escapes punishment. At worst, he loses his position, wealth, and protection. Still, some couples succeed. If breaking the marriage causes more trouble than accepting it, families sometimes surrender. In rari cases, these love stories turn into legends. Most noble marriages are practical, but these rare acts of defiance remind people that love never fully disappears. If modern dating feels dramatic, remember that it once involved secret weddings and furious noble families. In the Middle Ages, marriage united two people and their wealth. Love was welcome, but money mattered more. For a bride, marriage meant becoming part of an economic exchange. Her family prepared a dowry that could include money, animals, land, clothing, or household goods. These items went to the husband and became part of the household wealth. In some regions, the system worked the other way. The groom paid the bride's family instead. This payment compensated them for the loss of her labor. Either way, marriage involved a transaction. Someone was always paying someone else. These exchanges showed social status. A large dowry suggested power and influence. A small one suggested fewer options. The bride rarely controlled her dowry. It was managed by her husband and protected by law. If the marriage ended, reclaiming it was difficult and required legal help. When a bride price was paid, it worked like a purchase with no return. It replaced the work the woman would have provided to her family. Sometimes, marriage was avoided altogether. A person might choose to enter a monastery or convent instead. This meant giving up wealth, romance, and personal freedom. Yet even behind stone walls, emotions still existed. Love within religious life was forbidden and punished harshly. Members were meant to give their hearts only to God. Still, human feelings found small openings. Shared work, quiet moments, and small kindnesses sometimes became something more. Some monks and nuns wrote emotional letters disguised as religious writing. Some met in secret. Scandals occurred, punishments followed, and a few escaped to marry. Most returned to religious life, ashamed and silent. Monastic life demanded discipline, but people were still human. Even in silence, a single glance could feel powerful. Eventually, marriage settled into daily life. The ceremony ended, seasons passed, and slowly you began to notice things about each other that you had never known before. Maybe you slowly realized that marrying for land, animals, and agreements does not automatically create happiness. Either way, this is medieval marriage in its true form. Divorce, as we understand it, does not exist. Marriage is seen as holy, permanent, and constantly watched by the Church. It is believed to be approved by God and enforced by society. Annulment is possible, but only in rare and serious cases. Saying you are unhappy is meaningless. You must prove that one of you was too young, already married, closely related, which happened more often than people liked to admit, or that the marriage was never completed. Even then, written records and witnesses are required, making the process difficult and exhausting. For nobles, the situation is even more restrictive. Their marriages are political tools. Ending one could cause public outrage, family feuds, or even violence. Most unhappy couples remain together and learn to tolerate each other. They sleep separately, speak politely in public, and express their frustration through silence and distance. Emotional separation becomes normal. Affairs still happen, sometimes quietly, sometimes openly. Wealthy people hide lovers. Common people rely on neighbors who look the other way. The Church condemns these actions, but condemnation does not stop them. It only teaches people how to be more careful. For women, escaping a bad marriage is especially difficult. Even if a husband is cruel or disappears, society expects obedience and silence. Survival often means enduring hardship along with public judgment. Some marriages do improve with time. Shared labor, raising children, and surviving difficult seasons together can slowly build partnership, even if romance never fully appears. When a spouse dies, life changes suddenly. Death is common through illness, accidents, or simple misfortune. Widowhood brings an unexpected kind of freedom, especially for women. A widow can manage property, make decisions, and speak more openly. If she is healthy, remarriage often happens quickly because survival remains important. A widow who owns land attracts attention fast. Some suitors are sincere, while others are clearly interested in her property. Widowed men are also encouraged to remarry quickly, as running a household alone is difficult. Second marriages are often calmer. Older and more experienced, people choose partners for stability and companionship rather than family pressure. Rules still exist. The church discourages remarriage that happens too quickly, and families argue over inheritance and property. Romance still involves negotiation. Second marriages are common. Life is ours, and few people want to face it alone. Love exists here, not dramatic or poetic, but steady and built on trust and shared experience. Before loving someone new, another question appears. Are you even allowed to love them? In medieval thinking, love is not only emotional, but cosmic. Astrology plays a role. People consult the stars before making romantic decisions. A bad birth date or unlucky planetary alignment can ruin a match. Physical signs matter as well. Birthmarks are seen as omens, either good or bad. Superstition fills the space where logic ends. The church adds its own limits. Family connections are examined closely. Marriage between relatives is forbidden unless special permission is granted, often for a price. Wealth makes rules flexible. Social class is another barrier. Love between nobles and peasants is scandalous and usually ends badly, unless it becomes a tragic story told later. Omens appear everywhere. A bird flying overhead, spilled food, strange dreams, or sudden illness can all be signs of disaster. People use charms to attract love or block it. Love in the Middle Ages is never private. Everyone has an opinion. The church, the stars, the weather, and suspicious village figures all weigh in. And yet, people still fall in love, awkwardly, stubbornly, and often against all advice, because no matter the century, the human heart refuses to obey rules. So you live with this strange truth. Love exists, but it lives under rules, fears, and watching eyes. You learn quickly that wanting someone and being allowed to be with them are two very different things. Desire must wait. Emotion must hide. Duty always comes first. Daily life slowly replaces expectation. Marriage is no longer a question. It is a routine. You wake up early. Work fills the day. Fields must be tended. Animals. Fifth, cloth repaired. Food prepared. There is little time to think about romance when survival demands constant attention. Affection, when it appears, arrives quietly. It shows itself in small acts. Someone saves you the warmest cloak. Someone brings food without being asked. Someone stays silent beside you during a hard moment. These are not grand gestures. They are practical kindnesses, and in medieval life, that often means more than words. Arguments happen, but they are rarely dramatic. There is no space for emotional collapse. Disagreements fade into tired silence. You learn when to speak and when to endure. Love, if it grows, grows slowly, shaped by shared labor and shared exhaustion. Children arrive quickly. Society expects it. A marriage without children is questioned. Every pregnancy is dangerous. Every birth is a risk. Yet children are needed for labor, for inheritance, for survival. Parenthood binds couples together even when affection is thin. For women, life becomes narrower after marriage. Responsibilities multiply. Freedom shrinks. Public life fades. A woman's reputation now belongs not only to herself, but to her husband and family. One mistake can stain everyone connected to her. Men carry pressure too, though differently. A husband is expected to provide, protect, and control his household. Failure brings shame. Poverty brings judgment. Weakness is not forgiven easily. Love stories still circulate. People whisper about couples who dared to choose each other. A farmer who waited years for the same woman. A widow who married for affection instead of advantage. A noble who defied family orders. These stories are rare, but they survive because people need to believe something softer is possible. Songs and poems keep those hopes alive. Minstrels sing of impossible love, distant devotion, and tragic endings. Everyone knows these stories are not meant to be copied. They are meant to be felt and forgotten before mourning as years pass. you realize medieval love is not about happiness. It is about endurance. It is about finding comfort inside limits. It is about building something stable in a world that offers little safety. Some couples grow close in old age. When ambition fades and children leave, companionship finally has space to exist. Sitting together by firelight, sharing memories, complaining about the cold. This quiet closeness is never written into songs. But it is real. Others never find peace. They live parallel lives under one roof. Obligation keeps them together long after feeling disappears. Society approves. The church is satisfied. No one asks if they are content. And yet, despite everything, people still hope. Every generation believes it might be different. Every young person thinks rules will bend for them. Sometimes they do. Most times, they do not. That is the truth of medieval love. It is controlled, negotiated, watched, and restricted. But it never disappears. It adapts. It hides. It waits. Because no matter how strict the world becomes, the human heart continues to search for connection. Even when it is told not to. Even with all rules and dangers, secret moments still exist. A stolen glance across the market, a hand brushing against yours as you pass in the barn, a brief smile in the churchyard. These little sparks feel enormous because they are forbidden. They are fragile, hidden, and dangerous. Yet in the medieval world, even these small gestures are enough to keep hope alive. People learn to read signals carefully. A tilt of the head, a favor given, a shared look across a crowded hall. Each one is loaded with meaning. Saying too much could bring shame, punishment, or scandal. So, gestures, small gifts, and coded words become the language of love. A ribbon tied to a sleeve, a flower pressed into a letter, a loaf of bread left quietly for someone you admire. These are the true tokens of affection. Some love is silent and unspoken. A young man and woman might work side by side in the fields for years, never daring to speak about feelings. They watch, they wait, they endure. And still, love grows quietly, patiently, almost Patience is the only way it survives. Courtly love offers a different story. Among nobles, emotional games replace physical meetings. Poetry, songs, and symbolic gestures allow admiration from a distance. A knight might wear a lady's colors, fight in her name, or dedicate verses to her without ever touching her hand. The lady receives attention but remains distant, untouchable. It is theater. Ritual is devotion, a way to express longing without breaking rules. But even in the nobility, hearts are human. Jealousy, longing, and grief exist. A noble might fall for someone forbidden. A widow might be courted secretly. A marriage might be ignored emotionally. Even within strict codes, feelings slip through, finding their small openings. And those openings, however narrow, carry enormous weight in lives controlled by duty. Sometimes, love is tragic. A bride might be forced to marry a cruel man for land. A nobleman might be promised to a woman he does not desire. Children are born into alliances, and affection may never develop. These stories rarely have happy endings, yet they are common. They are reminders that love cannot always choose the path it desires. Still, human creativity finds a way. Secret letters are written with metaphors and hidden meaning. Lovers find intermediaries. Messages are passed through servants or traveling minstrels. Gifts are disguised as tokens of friendship. Each act carries risk, but the reward is emotional survival. The heart refuses to remain entirely silent, even when the law, society, and the church command it to do so. Time moves slowly. Generations live, labor, and die, under the weight of duty and expectation. Yet, love persists, often reshaping itself to fit the narrow margins allowed. Older couples may grow closer as children leave home. Widows and widowers may remarry, choosing practical companionship, yet discovering warmth and loyalty that was previously impossible. These relationships are quieter than the passionate romances of song and legend, but they are deeply human. Even for the unmarried, longing can be fierce. Young people dream, imagining worlds where choice exists. They may flirt carefully in public festivals, exchange small gifts, or share fleeting moments when supervision is lax. Every act is careful, calculated, meaningful. In these moments, desire survives, often more intensely because it must be hidden. Superstition and cosmic belief shape romance further. Astrology, omens, and birth dates influence decisions. A badly aligned star could halt a match. A birthmark might signify danger or blessing. Love is rarely private. It exists under the scrutiny of the stars, the church, and the village. Every action carries judgment, yet the heart persists. Stubborn and ungovernable. Love in the Middle Ages is practical, symbolic, and dangerous. It is often quiet, carefully measured, and built within the constraints of survival. Yet it is never absent. Even in the strictest households, even under the watchful eyes of family and clergy, affection, longing, and care find small ways to exist. This is the rhythm of medieval life. Survival first, duty always, and love in the margins. People endure, navigate, and sometimes they win small victories for the heart. Sometimes they grow to love the partner chosen for them. Slowly, quietly, through shared labor and companionship. Sometimes secret romances bloom and fade in shadows, leaving only whispered stories behind. And in this world, you realize, love is never fully controlled. No matter the century, no matter the rules, human hearts find their ways. They glance, they hope, they endure, and they persist. Love is patient, silent, and stubborn, waiting for even the briefest opening to breathe.